What's up guys, and welcome back to a new video, which will be a 12 episode video series where we will be diving into Laravel Nova. Quick pause. Do you want to support the channel and want me to continue on creating content? Well, you can support the channel on Patreon right now, where you get benefits such as a private Discord group where you can share your coding issues and other developers will help you out. If you are interested to join, the link can be found in the description down below. Laravel Nova is a beautiful admin panel created by the developers of Laravel itself, which can be added into Laravel applications. I'm going to be clear once by saying that most of the steps that we will be performing during this course will be from the official documentation of Nova itself, which will be linked in the description down below. Besides that, I'll be tweaking some functionalities here and there. Laravel Nova has a couple requirements that you should be aware of before installing it, but you most likely will be familiar with most of them. We will be using Laravel Nova 4, meaning that you need to have a Laravel project where the version is 8 or higher. It also makes use of Node and npm, where the Node version needs to be 14 or higher. Whenever you want to install Laravel Nova, you need to install it inside a Laravel project. It's not required to start from scratch, since you can add it inside an existing project as well. You do need to keep in mind that certain routes that Nova uses could override routes that you defined beforehand. An example might be the login endpoint of Laravel Breeze. Laravel Nova uses Sanctum, so you can't use an authentication that doesn't use Sanctum. Now we're going to start off from scratch, so we got to make sure that we create a default Laravel project first. I'm currently located inside the command line interface, where I'm going to create a new Laravel project by running the Laravel new product dashboard. Now this creates a new Laravel project, but not Laravel Nova. This needs to be done inside our project directory. So let's change directories by saying cd product dashboard. Nova needs to be installed as a composer package through a private repository, since it's a paid product from Laravel. So there are two methods in how you could do this. I've already opened my project inside PHPStorm, so I want to navigate to it, where we need to add a Nova repository inside our composer.json file. The other method is a little bit easier, where we need to set it up through the CLI, but it's easier to make mistakes right now, so I'll just add the command inside the description. Like I've mentioned before, we need to add a Nova repository inside our composer.json file. So let's open it, where we need to define a new section right below our require def called repositories, and let's set it equal to an array. Inside the array, we're going to add curly braces, where we need to add a basically key value pair right here, where the first one is type with a value of composer, while the second one will be URL, where the value will be https ://nova.laravel.com. We're almost done right here. We're going to add Nova as a requirement inside our project, which needs to be done right at the top inside our require section, where you'll see some other requirements such as the PHP version, the Guzzle, framework, Sanctum, and Tinker. So let's go right after Tinker, add a comma, where we will be adding a new package from Laravel, / and the package name is Nova. Then we need to add the version, which will be tilde, which stands for the next significant release of 4.0. Alright, we're ready to run Composer update so that Composer recognizes the Nova package we just added manually, which needs to be done right inside of the CLI. We're going to run the Composer update command, but we're going to add the --prefer -dist option right here, which basically downloads and unzips the dependencies that we added from Nova. If we hit enter, you'll see that it is loading the dependencies. Alright, our package has been added, but it didn't install Nova itself. We need to make sure that we install Nova and run our migrations. But before we could do that, we need to set up our database and add our credentials inside the .env file. So inside the CLI, we're going to run the MySQL command to create our database first by saying create database named product _dashboard. Let's hit enter. Alright. MySQL prompted us with a message saying that one row has been affected, meaning that our database has been created. We don't need MySQL anymore, so we could simply perform an exit right here. Before we could migrate our database, we need to make sure that we set up our database credentials inside the .env file. So let's do that. Right here, my password is Dari1234. My database name is product _dashboard and my username is root. Before we migrate our tables, I do want to add a simple user rule inside the user migration, which we will be using later on, where we're going to work with authorizing users with a certain type to certain actions. So let me search for my create users table. All right. Right under my password, I'm going to create a table boolean, which will be is_admin, and it has a default of false. We are ready to migrate our migrations. So let's navigate back to iTerm and let's run the PHP artisan migrate command. As you could see, it has run our migrations. So finally, we're ready to install Laravel Nova inside our project by running PHP artisan Nova install. This has done a couple things for us. It first published the Nova assets. It has published the Nova service provider inside the providers directory. It has created a dashboard for us. It has generated the user's resource based on the user model and migration, and the Nova scaffolding has been installed successfully. Now let's have a look at the routes that has been created for us through the PHP artisan route list command. We're not going to cover all these routes, but since we're going to work inside an admin panel, we need to have some kind of login or register route where we could either log in or create an account which we can use to log in. As you could see, right at the top, it has a Nova/login endpoint, which is a GET request, and it has a Nova/login endpoint, which will be a POST request, where it will handle the login functionality. Let's run valet link inside the CLI so we could open our project locally. Let me add my password. All right, a symbolic link has been created. So let's navigate to Google Chrome, and inside the URL, let's go to product-dashboard.test. Right here, you will find the default Laravel welcome screen. And if we change our URL to /Nova/login, you'll see that we have been prompted with Nova's login screen. This also indicates that the installation worked and Nova has been installed into our project. Since we're working with an admin panel, Laravel Nova doesn't have a register route because not any user should be allowed to create an account and log in. This should either happen inside the dashboard or through Nova, its command that you could run through the CLI to create a new user inside the users table. So let's navigate back to iTerm for a moment and let's run the PHP artisan command first. If we scroll up to the command starting with the letter N, right here, you'll find a complete list of commands that Nova has created for us. We won't be covering these right now, but during this course, you'll get familiar with most of them. The command that we need for this example is the Nova user command, right at the bottom, which will basically create a new user for us through the CLI. So let's run it. Let's say PHP artisan Nova user. It's asking us for a name, so let's say code with Dari. It's asking us for an email, which will be info@darinuzar.com, and it's asking us for a password, which will be my secret password. As you could see, it has prompted us with a message saying that the user has been created successfully. And if we navigate back to the browser right now and try to log in right here with the user credentials we just created through the CLI, click on login. And right here, you'll see that we have been redirected to the Nova dashboard. We will cover the dashboard later on during the series, but for now, we're going to cover the interface of Nova first. At the top, you'll find a logo right here of Laravel Nova. And next to it, you'll see unregistered, since we haven't added our credentials for Nova. We have a search bar. Now Nova supports dark mode and light mode, which you can toggle right here, which in my opinion is a huge feature that has been added in Nova 4. You'll see a bell right here for notifications. And you have the username right here, where you can log out. Now inside the sidebar, we have our user's resource, which is basically generated based on the user's model and the migration, but we will cover this later on. If we click on it, you'll see a table right here, where you basically find all resource operations. You can create a user, delete a user, edit a user, and view a user, and you'll even have the option to replicate it. So this basically means that all CRUD operations have been created for the user's resource. Now that we have access to Nova's dashboard, I want to dive into some important configuration and customization before we continue on. We haven't added our Nova credentials yet, and you'll see that right next to the logo it says unregistered. Now keep in mind that this step is optional. Even though you can use Nova locally, you do need to add your credentials once you want to deploy this project. So what I want to do first is adding Nova its credentials to show you how you could get rid of this ugly unregistered text in the top left corner. If you open a new tab and navigate to nova.laravel.com, click on Login. Well, you'll see that I'm already logged in. And right inside of the menu, you'll see an option where you can click on Licenses. If you have made a purchase from their site, you'll see a site right here where you could click on. Once you do that, you could create a new license key in the bottom right. Do that, copy the license key, and I'll see you back in the .env file where we need to define a new environment variable. Nova has a configuration file inside the config directory where you could add your Nova license key directly as a key value pair. I'd rather use a .env file for it, because there might be a chance where we need it at multiple places. And you also don't want to share your credentials with others. So let's define a new environment variable right above our database credentials with the name of Nova underscore license underscore key. And the value needs to be set equal to the license that we just copied. The Nova license key environment variable will be used inside the config directory. Let's open it, where you will find a new file called nova.php. Right here, you'll see that the Nova license key has been set equal to the environment variable of Nova license key that we just have set. Now there are two options on how you could check whether you have configured the Nova license key correctly. It has a CLI command for it, which is php artisan nova :check-license, where Nova replies with a success message saying that the license key that we added is valid. The second method is actually the easiest one, and that's simply navigating back to the browser, refresh it, and right here. You'll see that unregistered has been removed right here because our license key has been set right now. Whenever you try to deploy a project that uses Nova, you need to add a bit more configuration in order for it to work. So let me show you how that works as well. Let's navigate back to PHP Store, and the easiest method is basically adding a new file inside the root of our directory named auth.json. Now right here, we need to make sure that we add our Nova credentials. So follow along for a moment. Let's start off with curly braces. Then we have a http-basic, which is equal to curly braces, where we have the credentials of nova.laravel.com, which is equal to curly braces as well, where you need to define the username, which is the email you use to register your account on Laravel Nova, so info@darwinazar.com. Then we have a password, which needs to be the license key that we just copied for our Nova license key environment variable. So let's paste it. And that's basically it. Once you deploy a project, you need to make sure that your auth.json file is included. Now, if we navigate back to our local host and take a look at the interface of Nova, you'll see that they decided to go with a primary color of blue, since it also works on light mode. Nova allows you to customize your primary color through the Nova configuration file as well. So let me actually go back to dark mode. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and right inside of our nova.php file, let's search for colors. Right here, you'll find a key value pair, let's uncomment it, of branding. So basically our logo and colors. When you want to change your primary colors, you have to specify the colors you want to use for your Nova dashboard as a RGB value right here. And there are 3 different values you could add. And if you're familiar with Tailwind CSS, you can basically tell what it means. 400, 500, 600. 600 is the darkest, 400 is the lightest. Even though it uses Tailwind for the front end, you can't add your Tailwind classes right here. So let's change the colors to yellow and follow along for a moment. The first one will be 250 to 204 and 21. The last one is the opacity, which we will set to 1. Then for our 500 color, it will be 234, 179, and the last one will be 8. Then for our 600 color, we will be 202 for red, the green one will be 138, and the blue one will be 4, and the opacity will be set to 1 as well. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you will see that the primary color of our Nova dashboard has been changed to yellow. The Create User button, the Moon toggle for light mode and dark mode, and the Powered by Laravel Nova, the ID, and the user resource. Within the brand array, At the top, you'll see that we could also customize Laravel Nova its logo. This needs to be done as an absolute path to an SVG file of the logo. So you can't use an URL right here instead of the resource path method. Instead of using a resource path, I'm going to use a public path, which will look inside a public directory where I'm going to create a new images subdirectory, and I'm going to add my personal logo, which will be cdw-logo.svg. If you want to use my logo as well, you could just open it inside the GitHub repository and drag it inside our images directory. I'll cut out the part where I'll add it inside the public directory. As you could see, my logo magically popped up inside my images directory. And if we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that my logo has been added inside the top left corner and it has overridden the default Laravel Nova logo. Another configuration that I'd like to change up is the URL endpoints, since I want to get rid of the /Nova endpoint right inside of the URL. When working on an application in production, I don't really see the point of using the /Nova endpoint. I do understand why they added it, but once you have set up your Laravel Nova project, it's pretty much unnecessary. This can be once again customized inside the Nova configuration file where we're located in. And let's search for path, which is right at the top. Right here, you'll see the URI from Nova its API routes. You can see this pretty much as a prefix that can be added. So let's remove Nova right here, which changes our login endpoint from /Nova/login to login. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that we've been prompted with a 404 because the page has not been found. And if we remove Nova from the URL, you'll see that we're back at our user's resource. If we navigate back to the CLI for a moment and run the php artisan route :list command, you'll see that Nova has been removed from all of our routes, except from the Nova API, of course. If for some reason you don't want to work with light mode or dark mode and you want the system preferences of a user's browser to decide which theme Nova should use, you need to call the without theme switcher method from the Nova service provider. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's search for the Nova service provider, which is located inside the app directory where it has a subdirectory named providers. Now we need to make sure that we call the method inside our boot method, right below our parent boot. We're going to call it the Nova global class, : without theme switcher. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that in the top right corner, the theme toggler has been removed, and the system preferences of my Google Chrome browser is using dark mode by default. I'm personally a huge fan of dark mode, so I do want to have the option back. So let's navigate back and let's remove our without theme switcher method. The last configuration that I'd like to show you is changing up Laravel Nova its footer. At the moment, you're seeing a default footer right here that Nova has added by default. And with all due respect to the creators of Laravel, you don't want to have their names inside an admin panel that you will sell to a client. So let's change it up. When it comes to Nova, you have to overwrite the default footer that has been added right here. You can't just open a footer.blade.php file and make changes to it. If I navigate back to PHP Storm, to do a search through my entire application and search for powered by, which is basically the footer, you can see that the footer does exist, but if we take a closer look to the file name, right here, you'll find a cached file which you can't simply override. If you run the composer update command, it will delete your changes again. Therefore, Nova created a functionality where you could create your own footer inside the Nova service provider, where we are located right now. This can be done right inside of the boot method, where we need to call the Nova global class and adding the footer method to it. Now the footer method accepts a parameter, which will be a callback function, so function, where we will pass in the request. Then inside our footer, we could simply return a string right here of test. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that test has been printed out, but it kind of messed up our styling. The paragraph styling is the same, but it's aligned to the left right now. We should rather return the blade facade. So let's remove our string of test and let's call blade, pull it in, and add the static render method to it, which allows us to render a blade view from the resources directory. We're going to add a path right here of Nova footer. So let's define our path inside the resources directory, views directory, where we need to create a new directory first called Nova, with a new file inside of it called footer.blade.php. Now let's add simple markup right here. Let's start off with a div. Let's give it a class of text center. Let's add a paragraph with the text of this product, analytics dashboard has been powered by an anchor on the line below with my site to https blog.codewithdari.com. Inside our anchor, we're going to add the text of code with Dari. And right under our anchor, we're going to add a dot. Feel free to support him. We do need to add a class to our anchor, so let's outline it on the line below. And let's add a class of text yellow 600, hover text yellow 500, transition all, and finally the font is bold. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that our custom footer.blade.php file has overridden the default footer of Nova. Now let's clean it up a little bit. Let's navigate back to our Nova service provider for a moment. I personally think that it doesn't look clean to add it directly inside the boot method, since we will be adding more and more inside the boot method because all of the magic needs to happen right here. It also looks a bit clustered if we add multiple customizations right here. So I personally prefer to make a private method of our Nova footer right here and call it instead. So what we could do is click on option CMD_M and let's refactor it by naming the method getFooterContent. Let's set the visibility to private and let's click on refactor. Alright, it has replaced it with this getFooterContent, meaning that a new method has been created right here at the bottom. Right here, a private function getFooterContent, which is basically returning the rendered blade. The primary feature of building an admin panel are most of the times defined inside a resource controller, where simple CRUD operations will be performed. In Nova, you could easily define a new resource which basically handles all those operations for you behind the scenes. If we navigate to the CLI and run the php artisan command for a moment and scroll up to the end commands, you'll find a new command right here called Nova:resource, which will create a new resource class for you. Now let's run the command. Let's say php artisan Nova resource, and let's name our class product. If we hit enter, you'll see that Artisan prompted us with a message saying that our resource class has been created and it has been stored inside the app directory, Nova directory, where it created a product class. Now this doesn't generate a products controller where you'll find all resource methods defined. Nova works a little bit different. If we navigate back to our source code for a moment and open the app directory, you'll see that Nova has created a Nova subdirectory for us when we installed Laravel Nova. Inside the Nova subdirectory, you'll find a dashboard subdirectory, which we won't cover right now, but definitely will do later on. And it has also created a product.php file for us. And if we open it, you'll see the class called product, which is extending the resource class, which has been located in the same directory. Right here, you'll find static functions that you can override inside any other class which is extending it. Now let's close it and let's focus on our product class. Our first property is already throwing us an error right here. This is happening because a Nova resource class gets its information from the associated module. In most cases, you'll have to name both of these classes the same. So whenever you want to create a product resource, you need to have a product module. Right now, it's throwing us an error because it's looking for a class with the same name inside the model directory. From that model, it could grab the associated table from the database or migration. Does that make sense? The flow we just performed is actually wrong. So let's delete our product resource class. Alright, let's navigate to the CLI and we're going to create a new model named product by saying php artisan make me a new model called product, and we will be adding the -m flag for it for our products migration. If we hit enter, you'll see that our product model and our product migration has both been created. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's search for the create products table. We're not going to work with relationships yet, so let's define the tables first that a product needs to have. Now next to the ID, it will be a table string for the slug. We have a name, so table string name, which will be the product name. We have a table string for our description. We have a table double for the price. We have a table string for our SKU, which we will cover later on. We have a table integer for our quantity. And we have a table boolean for our is published, which has a default of true. Now let's navigate back to the CLI and let's perform that PHP artisan migrate command to migrate our products table. Now let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's search for our model / product. Since we need to make sure that we fill our property fillable inside the product model so we can add mass assignment to it. So right under our trait, let's say protected fillable is equal to an array. And the columns that will be added for mass assignment will be the slug, the name, the description, the price, the SKU, the quantity, and the is published. Now that we have defined our product model and our product migration, we should run the Nova resource command one more time inside the CLI to define our resource again. So let's navigate back to the CLI and let's run PHP artisan Nova resource named product. If we hit enter, navigate back to PHP Storm, open our product resource class, you'll see that the value of our property model isn't giving us an error right now, since our product model does exist. Once again, it found the class model because we named our resource class the same. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that inside our navbar, a new resource of product has been added. If we click on it, you'll see that we have no data defined inside our resource. Now this is obviously happening because we don't have data and we haven't defined our table. So let's do that. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's scroll down to the fields method right here. Now our fields method is returning an array, which should represent the tables from our database. At the moment, it's simply returning the ID of our resource right here. Now let's actually delete it, because we do obviously want to have an ID, but there's not really a point of showing it to the user. Laravel offers tons of different classes that you could use to create new field types, and a field type is basically what we have right here. I can't cover them all because there are tons of them, which I will link in the description down below, but keep in mind that the usage of almost all of them are identical, meaning that they work in the same exact way. The only difference is that you need to call a different class. Now let's work with a couple fields for this example. Now keep in mind that every field type is a class itself. So whenever we write down slug, which is a Nova field type, we need to make sure that we pull it in. And right inside of the import right here, you'll see a Laravel /Nova /fields. So let's hit enter. Once you have imported the class, you could add a double colon, which PHP Storm has done for me, and call the static make method right here. This will basically create a field inside the table, but also an input field where we can create new products or edit a new product. Now the make method is throwing us an error, and that's happening because it's accepting one required parameter, which is the name of the field. Inside our database, we named it slug. So let's add a capital S of slug. Quick note, a huge plus that Nova has is that it will change our Pascal case of slug right here into snake cases. So it could find a database column for us, which is pretty awesome. And that's what I like about Laravel in general. It uses so many magic methods behind the scenes. Nova also allows you to chain multiple methods to the make method to specify the needs, what is required and whether it should be visible or not. For the slug, we're basically going to chain the from method to it, since we don't want to define the slug ourselves every time we define a new product, but it simply has to be created from the name column. So let's say from the name. Now before we test this out, I quickly want to create a new user through the database. So let me connect real quick. Alright, let me open the products table. Now let me add one new row right here. Let's say the ID is 1, the slug is iPhone 14, the name is iPhone 14 as well. The description is test, price is $10.19. The SKU is just a random number. Quantity is 25. It is published and it's updated at. All right. Now let's run it, close it, navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh our products overview, and right here, you'll see that a new column of slug has been added to our table. Now Laravel offers two shortcuts when you're located on a resource page. If you press on the letter C on your keyboard, you'll be navigated to the Create Resource page. If we navigate back for a moment and open one specific product, you'll see that we have been redirected to the Product Detail page. If we click on the letter E right here, you'll see that we've been redirected to the Update Resource page, so basically editing a product. For now, let's go back and let's click on C, where we have been redirected to the Create Product page, where you'll see that it has created a new input field for our slug. If you don't want to name your column or label right here, the same as the underlying database column, you could pass in a second argument inside a make method. Right here. The first argument will represent the new column label name. So let's say slug of product, while the second argument will be the attribute, which needs to be equal to the database column. In our case, it will be slug. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that the label of our input field has been changed to slug of product. Now let's navigate to PHP Storm and let's undo what we just did and keep it equal to the slug, because it was just a simple example to show you what you could customize and what not. Now let's add all the other fields that we have defined inside our migration. Now our name will be a string, so we need to make use of the text field type. Then we need to change the make method to it, and what we want to make is a new name. On the line below, we need to define the description, which we will be using the markdown field type for, with the name of the description. Then we have our price, which we won't use as an integer or a number, but simply as a currency, and I'll show you why in a second, with the name of price. Then we have our SKU, which will be a text, : make, and it will be called SKU. Then we need our quantity, which is a number, : make, quantity. Then we have our status, which was a Boolean, so we could basically say, well, get me the Boolean field type, make, and we're gonna pass in two arguments right here. The name will be status, while the column name will be is published. If we save it and navigate to the browser and refresh it, you'll see that we have defined all input fields to create a new product. If we navigate back to the overview, you'll see that we have filled in our table. I am missing my slug because I need to get rid of the attribute. All right. Yes, this looks better. Now, honestly, I got to say that I really like the design of Nova, but there are some things that are bothering me. You can't customize the input fields when you create a new product right here to align them next to each other. At the moment, some of them are taking way too much space. Think about the slug. Why do you need a slug input field that's this big? We're not working with that many input fields, but imagine if you did. It will be a scroll party right here. And the same goes for the text area field, which we aren't using right now, but it just looks weird that all the other fields are equal aligned and the markdown pops out. And there's no method you could chain to make the width smaller. So I hope that this definitely changes in the future of Nova. But let's continue on. I think we should somehow show users that certain fields are required, right? Since we haven't defined any nullable tables inside our migration. So even though they are required, you'll have to specify it here again. And that's pretty easy to do. What we could do is navigate back to PHP Storm and simply chain the required method to fields that are required. Next to the slug, we have the name, which is required as well. The description should be required as well. The price too, which is very important. The SKU as well. The quantity as well. And the status as well. So let's say required. If we save it and navigate back, refresh it, you'll see that an asterisk has been added to certain labels of our field, which basically indicates that they are indeed required. Our price is currently using $1, which is not something that I want because I'm from Europe. Now once again, Laravel Nova is very powerful, so we could navigate back to PHP Storm, and right after our currency required, we could chain another method, which is currency, where we basically could add the currency we want to use. So let's say EUR for euro. Save it, navigate back, refresh it, and you'll see that the dollar sign has been changed to a euro sign. Nice, right? We're already making progress. Now what's next? Well, the slug will be created based on the name. So why give users the options to add a slug themselves? Nova offers an incredible option for it. You can't chain a disabled method to it, but it allows you to add the with meta method to it, which allows you to add meta information to it. So let's do that. Let's navigate to PHP Storm, and let's align it on the line below. Let's chain a new method to it called with meta, which accepts an array with a key of extra attributes with a value of an array. Now let's hit enter right here, where we're simply going to pass in another key value pair, where we will set the read only equal to true. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that our slug input field has been disabled and you can't add it yourself anymore. Once we create a new product and try to edit it, it'll add a customization button next to it, which allows you to edit the slug. Let me actually show that to you. Let's go to a product, let's edit it. And right here, you can't edit the slug, but you need to click on customize first. If we navigate back to our product overview, create a new product, add a name of iPhone 14 Max, you'll see that the slug will be auto-generated based on the name input field, since we changed the from method to it, and it's creating the slug from the name input field. So let's add the product. Let's add a description of test again, the price of $14.19, SKU is a random number, quantity of 25, and the status is true. As you can see in the bottom right, it allows you to create one and go back to the overview, or you could create a product and add another, which is a pretty cool option if you want to add products fast. Let's click on create product. You'll see that we have been prompted with a message saying that this product has been created, and we have been redirected to the show method of a resource controller, right? We're looking at one single product right now. At the top, it's saying product details of an ID of number 2. By default, Nova shows the ID of rows, but it allows you to change this right inside of the resource class. So let's do that. Right at the top, you'll find a public static title property right here, which we could change to name. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that the product details of iPhone 14 Max has been printed out. Now if we click on products in the sidebar, you'll see that a new product has been added right here, where the name is iPhone 14 Max. In most cases, you don't want to show all fields on your table overview, but they are required when you want to create a product. An example might be the slug. It's not really necessary for a user since we already have the name, which is pretty much the same as the slug, right? But the spaces have just been replaced with dashes. Nova allows you to change certain methods to show or hide fields based on the resource method. So it has the show on index, show on detail, show on creating, and show on preview to show a field. It also allows you to hide fields through the hide from index, hide from detail, hide when creating, and hide when updating methods. It also allows you to show it on certain pages through the only on index, only on forms, only on detail, and except on forms methods. We obviously can't cover them all, so let's just go over a couple fields and see where we could apply one or another. I'll also add a link in the description if you want to go over them on your own pace. Let's start off with the slug. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Now let's go to our fields method right here. And let's actually go right above our with meta just to align it easier, where we're going to change the hide from index method to disable it from the table overview. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, you'll see that our slug isn't visible on the table. And if we click on create product, you'll see that we can indeed see our slug when creating a new product. At the moment, we're basically hiding it from the index method inside a resource controller, if we think about it as a Laravel application that uses resource controllers. Next to the methods I've just mentioned, Nova also allows you to build up a model to quickly see information about a product. Now this can be done by simply chaining the show on preview method to the fields that should be visible. Now let's say that you don't want to show all these fields to a user, but you do, let's say, want to show the name. What we could do is simply chain the show on preview method. Now let's do it for a couple more. Let's say the description as well. So the description is show on preview. The price is pretty important as well. So let's align it for a moment and let's say show on preview. The SKU is important, but we're just going to skip it. Let's say the quantity as well. So let's say that we want to show our quantity on preview. And let's say the status as well. So let's align it and let's say show on preview. Now, if we navigate back to Google Chrome, you won't directly see changes on your table overview. But if we click on the triple dots right next to the CRUD operations, you'll see two options. Replicate, so basically creating a new product with the same values, and preview, which has been created by the show on preview method that we just added. If we click on it, you'll see a model popping up with a name, description, price, quantity, and status, which are basically the fields that we added to our field types. Now, if you try to create a new product, you'll see that it has default placeholders, which are based on the label. Nova allows you to override it, and guess what? With the placeholder method. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm and start at the top. Let's say that for our name, it has the placeholder method, which says product name. It's not necessary for the description because it's a markdown. Let's say for the price, let's add a placeholder of product price, the SKU of placeholder product SKU. Then we have the quantity, which has the placeholder of product quantity. And we can't add it for the Boolean as well because it's a checkbox. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that we have overridden the default placeholders of a product. Now at the moment, you'll see that our table styling of our overview is pretty messed up because some columns are aligned to the left, center, or even to the right, which in my honest opinion is pretty strange. This should be a default setting that Nova applies themselves, but it could be easily fixed by chaining the text align method to it, where you could choose between left, center, or right. Now, I personally like to work from left to right, so let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and right at the top, start with our slug, add the text align method to it with a default of left. Let's do it for the name as well. Let's say text align left. The markdown isn't necessary because we are not showing our markdown on our table overview. We do with our price, so let's say text align is left, the SKU as well. Same for our quantity and our Boolean as well. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that our table has been aligned to the left, which makes the looks of it a lot better. Now finally, I'd like to show you how you could add additional information to a certain input field. At the moment, we're using the SKU right here, which most people aren't even familiar with. What we could do is navigating back to PHP Storm, and for our SKU text field, we could basically chain the help method to it, where we could pass in a string as an argument where we pass information about the input field. So let's say number that retailers use to differentiate products and track inventory levels. Let's navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, and right here, you'll see that a paragraph has been added right below the input field with information of the data that needs to be added right there. This is a huge feature, but the font is actually pretty small, and in dark mode, the text is very gray, which makes it pretty difficult to read. I want to start off by configuring a pretty important feature in Nova's table overview, which is sorting the table. At the moment, sorting has not been implemented, and it's pretty simple, just like a lot of other configurations. Nova allows this sortable method to the resource field where we want to enable sorting on. So let's navigate back to our product resource and let's add sorting on our text field of name, where we're going to chain a new method to it called sortable, which basically allows us to sort the name column in either ascending or descending fashion. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that the arrow up and arrow down on the column title have been added. If we click on it, you'll see that a query has been added to the URI right here, where the product's order has been set to the field name, where the product's direction has been set equal to ascending. If we navigate back to PhpStorm, we should add our sortable method to a couple more fields. The second one is the price, so let's say sortable. Let's say on our SKU as well, the quantity. And finally on our status as well, so let's say sortable. If we navigate back to the browser and refresh it, you'll see that we added the arrow up and arrow down for sorting on all of our columns. Now if we try to search for an item, so let's say iPhone, you'll see that we're not finding any records, even though we added a product with the name of iPhone. If we add the ID of, let's say 2, you'll see that we indeed find one row where the ID is equal to 2. Now this basically means that the search has been implemented based on the ID. Now this can be modified. Right inside of our product resource class, you'll find a new property at the top named search right here, which has a value of an array. At the moment, we're saying that it should search on the ID, but we can also add the name, the description, and also the SKU. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, let's say we want to search for test, you'll see that we have 2 products because the description of both products are test. If we say the SKU of 494, we have 1 row, and on the name of iPhone, we'll find 2 rows. Now, if you think that Nova uses too much space inside table rows and you want to show more rows below each other, you could override a property from the resource class. Right now, you'll see that it has a lot of spacing above and below iPhone. So let's get rid of that. Let's navigate back to PhpStorm and let's define a new property, which is public static table style. Now the value needs to be equal to tight. If we navigate back, refresh it, you'll see that a lot of spacing has been removed from the top and bottom of a row. This is very interesting whenever you want to add many rows below each other. It also allows you to override the default styling of the column itself. So it basically will add column borders to make it more clearer. This can be done by creating a new property or basically overriding the property, of public static show column borders, which needs to be set equal to true. If we save it, test it out, you'll see that it has added borders all around the table headers and the table rows. I'm not really a fan of it, so let's just comment out both of them. Alright. If we navigate back and click on one specific row, you'll see that we have been redirected to the product data of a specific post. Now most of the data right here is also visible inside the table, so I find it a bit overkill to be redirected to this page. Nova allows you to change the behavior of your click-through, another property that you could override from the resource class. Let's add it right here, public static click action, which needs to be equal to a string. Now there are multiple options that you could add right here. The first one is the default one. Then we have the edit page. So you could directly edit a resource once you click on it. You could have an option of select. And let's actually navigate to the browser so I could show you what I mean with this. If we click on products in the navbar, click on one item, you'll see that we're selecting it. Or we could select multiple. But navigate back, remove select, and add preview right here, which will show you the preview of a product. And finally, we have ignore, which pretty much turns off the click event. So if we try to click on one row right now, you'll see that we don't have that option. Personally, I find it nice to work with a product that directly goes to the edit page. So let's replace ignore with edit, because the most important fields are also filled in with default values. If we navigate back, refresh it, and click on one resource, you'll see that we have been redirected to the edit page or update page of one specific product. As you could see at the bottom of a table, Nova added pagination, where you have a previous button, the amount of pages, and a next button. Next to this pagination type or styling, it offers 3 more pagination styles that you can integrate. Keep in mind that changing the pagination will change the pagination on all tables, since it needs to be added inside the Nova configuration file, which makes the changes globally. So let's navigate to PHP Storm, search for nova.php, and let's search for pagination. Alright, right here you'll see a pagination type of simple, which is the default one. The second one is links. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that it basically added the links in the bottom left corner. And I'm actually not really a fan of this one, but I do really enjoy using the last one. So let's navigate back, remove links, and let's add load-more. If we navigate back, refresh it, you'll see in all resources have been loaded, and we can't really show it right here, but I'll do that in 1 minute because it allows you to override a property named per page options, where you can pass in an array of values that the user can choose from when working with pagination. So let's do that. Let's navigate back to our Nova product, and let's define a public static per page options property, which is equal to, let's say, 1. We're just adding 1 right here because we have 2 rows inside of our database. If we refresh it, you'll see that it's showing 1, but it adds an option right here where we could load 1 more. And right here, you'll see that it has been added inside the same table rather than going to another page. I do want to add more than 1 obviously, so let's say that the steps needs to be 50, 100, and 150. Now these steps will be added in the drop-down right here, where you could see per page, 50, 100, and 150. If we delete rows from our application right now, they will be deleted for good. Now adding the soft delete functionality to your application doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Nova, but once you implement it inside your application, Nova will recognize it and it will add the front end based on it. So let's implement it. We do need to create a new migration since we do need to add the soft deletes column inside our table. So let's navigate back to the CLI for a moment, and let's run the PHP artisan make me a new migration named add_soft_deletes_to_products_table. And we're also going to define the table right to it of _table is equal to products. Let's hit enter. All right, it has created the migration for us. So let's navigate to PHP Storm. Let's search for add_soft. All right, this is our migration. And we're simply going to add the table soft deletes right here. Now let's navigate back to the CLI and let's run PHP artisan migrate to migrate our tables. All right, it has added a new column to our products table. The next step is adding Laravel its soft delete trait on the model where you want to implement soft deletes on. Where we want to implement it on will be the model/product, where we already have one trait right here. So let's add a comma and let's add the soft deletes trait of our database Eloquent, which we need to pull in. Now, by simply adding the soft deletes trait, our soft deletes functionality has been implemented. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, let's refresh it. Let's try to delete the iPhone 14 Max. It's prompting us with a warning, so let's say delete. All right, as you can see, it has been deleted from our overview. But if we open the drop-down option right here, you'll see a new option that has been created based on the soft delete functionality that we just implemented, where we could choose our products based on the trashed or only trashed. So if we say only trashed, you'll see that our iPhone 14 Max is still visible and our delete icon to the right has been replaced with a restore icon. If we click on it, you'll see that it's prompting us with a confirmation whether we really want to restore it. So let's say yes. So we have no trashed products anymore. So let's say with trashed. And right here, our iPhone 14 Max has been restored. And this is actually something I really like about Nova. It basically creates functionalities based on functionalities that you create inside your code. When it comes to relationships in Nova, you have the ability to define any relationship you've got within Laravel itself. You first got to make sure that you create a new Laravel resource where you can add a relationship to. So let's start off by doing that. Since we got our product, we should link it to a specific brand. So let's start off by defining our model from the command line interface. We will be starting off by defining our brand. So let's say PHP artisan make me a new model named brand, and let's add a -m flag to it for the migration. Now keep in mind that Laravel has tons of relationships, so I can't cover them all, but most of them work in the same exact way. So let's navigate back to PHP Store, and let's search for our new migration, which is create brands table. Now right under our ID, we're going to define a new column named name. Then we have a table string, which will be the website URL. Then we have the table string as well, which will be the industry. And finally, we have a table, which is a Boolean, where the name of the column is underscore published. Now let's also make sure that we enable mass assignment on our brand model. So let's open our brands model, and right under our has factory trait, let's define our protected fillable property, which is equal to an array. And in there, we're going to say that our name, website URL, our industry, and our is published are enabled for mass assignment. We're almost ready to migrate our brand migration, but we do need to make a change to our product's migration first, since one product is related to one brand. And it needs to be required as well, so whenever we create a new product, the brand needs to be added to it as well. And we can't just add a foreign key constraint to our product's migration, because our brand's migration has been created after. So let's navigate back to the CLI, and let's define a new migration. Let's say PHP artisan make me a migration named add underscore brand underscore ID to my products table. And let's also add the table to it by saying -- table is equal to products. So let's navigate back to PHP Store, and let's open our add brand ID to products table, where we're simply going to add one column, which will be the table unsigned big integer, since it's a foreign key constraint of brand underscore ID. Now let's make sure that we add the foreign key constraint by saying table foreign. The foreign key will be the brand underscore ID. It will reference the column ID on the table brands. And once a brand gets deleted, delete all related products as well. Alright, we got to make sure that we reset our migrations first. So let's navigate back to iterm, and let's run PHP artisan migrate fresh to drop all migrations and rerun them again. This does mean that we lost all of our data. So let's define a new user through the CLI as well by saying PHP artisan Nova user. We're going to add the same credentials. So my name is code with Dari. I've got my email address right here and my password. We've been prompted with a message saying that our user has been created successfully. And before we define our product and brand relationship, we should make sure that we define our resource first, so we could add brands into our application. So let's say PHP artisan Nova make me a resource named brand. Let's hit enter. Alright, let's navigate back to PHP Store, and let's open our brand resource, and let's start at the top. Our model is correct. Our title property needs to be changed to the name of the brand. Then we have our search bar above the table, which has ID and name. Then we need to define our fields. We won't be using the ID right here, so let's remove it. And we're going to define 4 new fields right here, which will represent the brand. The first one has a field type of text. We're going to change the make method to it. The name of our field type is name. We're going to change the sortable method to it. We're going to change the required method to it. And we're going to change the show on preview method to it. Now let me actually align it on the line below. Alright. Now the second field type will be an URL. So let's pull it in. make. We're going to make a website URL with the attribute name of website underscore URL. We have a show on preview. It's required. And it will be text align to the left. Now let me align this on the line below as well. All right. The third field type will be text as well. It has a name of industry. It is sortable. It is required. And it is shown on preview. And finally, the text align will be left as well. So let me align this again. And the last field type will be our Boolean. Name will be status, while the attribute will be is_published. It is sortable, and it is shown on preview. Finally, it's going to be text aligned to the left. Now let me align this on the line below. All right. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that we have a new option right below our resources named brands. So let's click on it. Let's create a new brand. Let's add a name, and let me actually make it capital right here. That's on me right here. All right. Refresh it. Those are just small things that are bothering me when making a tutorial. The name will be Apple. The website URL will be https apple.com. The industry is electronics, and the status is checked. Let's click on create and add another, because the second one will be Microsoft. The website URL will be https www.microsoft.com. The industry will be electronics as well, and the status, oops, I pressed enter right here, so let's edit it. All right, update it. And right here, you'll see that we have two new brands. Now it's time to add our product resource. If we click on our products right now and create a new one, you don't really see an option right here where we could choose a brand. When you want to work with relationships in Nova, you got to define them inside the models before you could use them inside your resource. So let's navigate back to our product model. And then right below our protected fillable property, we're going to define a new public function. One product can only have one brand. So we're going to define a singular brand right here. Then we're going to return this belongs to, and what it belongs to is the brand class. We also need to make sure that we define a relationship the other way around as well, where Nova will create an overview of all products from a specific brand. So let's open our brand model. And once again, let's say it out loud. One brand has many products. So we need to define a plural method right here named products, which will return this has many products. Now, if we navigate to our product resource and scroll to the bottom right below our Boolean field type right here and add another one, and the field type will not be a type, text or whatever, but it will be a belongs to Nova field, which is basically representing the relationships between our products and our brands. Now this will not look inside a table and look for a brand ID column, but it will look inside our product model and it will search for our relationship that we have defined at the bottom. So let's navigate back and let's define the method name that we just defined, named brand. Now let's change the sortable method to it and also the show on preview method. Let me align it on the line below. All right. If we navigate to the browser, refresh our create products overview, and right at the bottom, you'll see that we added brands right here. And if we click on the select, you'll see that we have two options. The first one is Apple and the second one is Microsoft. Now let's add a new product with the name of iPhone 14. The name is test. The price is $10.19. The SKU is just a random number. The quantity is 25. The status is checked and the brand is Apple. Keep in mind that this does not change the data that will be entered into the database. Behind the scenes, it will make sure that the brand ID will be added and not the brand name. If we click on create product, you'll see our product details overview of iPhone 14. If we click on products in the sidebar, you'll see that the brand of Apple has been added right here into a product overview, and we could even click on it to open information about a brand. A pretty cool feature that Nova offers is that you could also show products from a specific brand. Right now, you're only seeing basic information about their brand, which is alright, but wouldn't it be cool if you could see all products of a specific brand? Well, it has a feature for that. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and let's open our brand resource, and right at the bottom, below our Boolean field type, we're going to define a has many Nova field right here, which will look inside a brand model, and it needs to search for a method called products. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see a new table right below our brand's details of Apple, where you pretty much see the same table as a product resource, but only products that have a brand of Apple. Now we can check this by going back to the brand's overview, click on Microsoft, and right here, you'll see that Microsoft has no products inside our database. Another thing you need to be aware of is that it doesn't add a new input field when you want to define a new brand. Right here, you'll see that only the name, website URL, industry, and status are visible, even though we basically added a new field type right here of has many. When building applications, you do want to have more validation than just making fields required. Nova allows you to attach the same rules as you might use when creating form validations in Laravel itself. If we navigate back to PHP Storm, you can see that we haven't really added validation right here, since a brand can be created with the same exact name. Obviously, the best possible way is by adding it inside your migration and sending a better error message to the user once they try to create a new brand that already exists. Bear with me. Let's remove the required method that we have right here on our text field of name. Then we could chain the rules method to it, where we could add rules from the validator. So let's say that our name should be required. It has a maximum of 255 characters, and it needs to be unique on the table brands. This all looks familiar, right? Let's navigate back to the browser, and let's create a new brand right here with a name that we already have. So let's say Apple. The website URL is https apple.com, industry is electronics, and the status is checked. Let's click on create, and right here you'll see that we have been prompted with an error message right under our input field, saying that a name has already been taken. Now the issue that we have with the rules method is that it applies for updating as well. If we navigate back to our brands overview and try to edit Microsoft, try to edit the website URL to, let's say, adidas.com and click on update, you'll see that we're being prompted with an error message since we said that the title should be unique. Nova offers you to define a rule when a resource is being updated, which happens through the update rules method. So let's navigate back, and let's keep the same rules that we have right here for now, and let's chain the update rules method to it. Right here, we should apply rules whenever a resource is being updated. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to make sure that the name is unique on the table brands, comma name, comma, and based on a global resource ID. So let's say resource ID. Now before the update rules works, we need to make sure that we remove our third parameter inside our rules method, because we have duplication right now. Navigate back, replace the name to Apple, click on update. You'll see that the name has already been taken, has been prompted to us, which is alright. But if we change it to Microsoft, click on update, you'll see that our brand has been updated. The name is just equal to Microsoft, which it was, but the website URL has been updated right here. Now the same logic can be implemented when you want to create a new brand. So let's navigate back to our resource overview, create a new brand, and we don't want to give a user the option to create a new brand with the same name. So what we could do is navigate back, go right below our update rules method, define the creation rules method, which basically accepts the same rule. So it needs to be unique on the table brands. The column name needs to be checked based on the resource ID. If we try to create a new brand right now, let's say with the name of Apple, the website URL is https apple.com, industry is electronics, and the status is checked. Create another. you'll see that the name has already been taken, has been prompted to us. But if we change it to, let's say, Adidas, which we don't have, let's say clothing as an industry, create, and you'll see that the brand has been created. When it comes to admin panels, you might not want to show all information to users, or you might want to hide certain functionalities if a user doesn't have the right role inside your application. Laravel offers policies, which is part of authorization in Laravel. Policies allow you to protect content or resources from unauthorized users. Nova uses Laravel its policy structure, which can be created through the CLI. Whenever you want to make use of policies, you have to create one for a particular model or resource. Now we won't be creating a policy for a product resource, since everyone can create a new product. But let's say that only users with an admin role can create or edit a brand. Within big applications, this prevents duplication or brands that you don't want to have within your application. So we need to make sure that we create a policy for our brand. So let's navigate to the CLI. And we're going to use the same naming conventions as making anything in Laravel. We're going to say PHP artisan make me a new policy, named brand policy. We could hit enter right here, where an empty policy class will be generated for us. But Laravel offers an option that you could add which will create all CRUD methods for your policy. This can be done by adding the -- model is equal to product option to it. If this is your first policy, a policy directory will be created with a brand policy class inside of it. If we navigate to the browser and click on brands in the navbar, you'll see that we have been prompted with a 403. This is happening because we need to make sure that we register our policy as well, where we're basically going to tell Laravel which policy needs to be used when authorizing against a given model. Authorizing policies needs to happen inside the auth service provider. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's open our auth service provider, which is located inside the providers directory. Right here, you'll see a property called policies. So let's remove the comment inside of it and let's add our policy right here. We're going to define a key value pair right here, where the key will be our model. So brand class, and then we need to define the value, which will be the policy class, which is the brand policy. If we navigate back to the browser and refresh it right now, you'll see that we're still being prompted with a 403. So what's going on right here? When working with policies, Nova defines default permissions when it comes to the methods that have been added inside the brand policy class. I've also opened the official documentation of Laravel Nova, which is the authorization page, and if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll find the default permissions of the policy actions. You can view any, view, create, update, replicate, delete, and so on, and they have a default permission where most of them have been set to forbidden, which is basically our 403. If you don't define the methods inside your policy, it will use the default values. So it's basically returning a boolean. If it is allowed, it's returning a true. If it's forbidden, it's returning a false. We won't be covering all the policy actions right here, but once you understand how one or two works, the same principles will be used for any other. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's open our brand policy. And let's start off with our first policy, which is the view any method right here. We got to tell Nova that any user that's logged in is allowed to enter the table overview. So what we could do is either return a true, or we could just return the user's object, which will also return true. If we comment out all other methods that we have defined right here, navigate back to Google Chrome, open our local host, refresh it, and right here, you'll see that our brand's overview is visible again, but all options on a resource have been removed, as you can see at the right of a row. Once again, this happens because it uses the default permissions. And for the create, update, and delete, you'll see that the default permissions right here have been set to forbidden, so basically false. Now the next method inside PHP Storm will be our view method right here. And this is basically the eye icon on the product's overview. Users with any role can see that. So there's no harm to it. So let's return the user object. Comment out everything that's right below our view method, navigate back to Google Chrome, localhost, refresh it, and right here, you'll see that we're getting an error message because it's expecting a second argument that we're not using. So let's remove our product object, refresh it, and right here, you'll see that the eye icon is visible, and if we click on it, you'll see that this option works as well. Here comes the fun part. What we have to do is telling our application that users with an admin role can create, update, and delete brands. So we basically need to make sure that we allow permissions by overriding the default one. So if we navigate back to PHP Storm and uncomment what we just comment, obviously, and start off with the create method, we basically set that the is_admin column inside our database is a boolean, so either true or false. So what we could do is basically say, well, return the user object, but only get the is_admin. Now, if we copy our return statement and add it inside the update method, and let's actually remove the product object, same thing for the delete, and restore as well, and force delete as well. Now let's navigate back to Google Chrome. Let's click on brands, and right here you'll see that the options are not visible right now, which basically means that a user that is logged in is not an admin, because by default we have set that the user is not an admin, so we need to change it manually right inside of our user's resource. We could also manually change it inside our database, but I personally think it's easier to just add a new field type right here. So let's navigate to PHP Storm, open the user's resource, scroll down, right below our passport field type, let's create a boolean with the name of is_admin. Now let's chain the sortable method to it and add the show on preview method to it. Now let me align it on the line below. All right. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that the user that is logged in is not an admin. So let's edit it. Let's check the checkbox. Let's update it. And if we click on brands right now, you'll see that the edit icon and the delete icon have both been added. We could even make our policy cleaner. So let's open it for a moment, right here, because every single method is using the user object. So I recommend creating a property of the user object, which you'll set inside a new constructor, which then allows you to remove the object from all methods and define it just once. So let's navigate to the top, and right below our trait, let's define a private user property, and then we're going to define a public function _construct, where we're going to say, well, this user is equal to the authenticated user. And I forgot to pull in our auth class. All right. So what we could do right now is basically say, well, let's get rid of our argument of our user object, and let's return this user. The same thing needs to be done for the view method. So we're going to return this user, create method as well. So this user, and then the is_admin column. Same thing for update. Well, we could actually copy the create method and replace it right here. Finally, the force delete. All right. And I obviously forgot to remove our arguments. Excuse me. Now let's navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, and right here, you'll see that this works as well. Now the last thing that I want to show you is disabling authorization for all of our Nova resource modules, which needs to be done right inside of the resource class. And where I want to add it to is the user's resource. So I don't want to give anyone the option to create, edit, delete, or view a user. So what we could do is navigate back to PHP Storm, right inside of our user's resource class, scroll to the bottom, and right here we could overwrite the public static function authorizable by simply returning true. If we navigate back to Google Chrome and refresh it, and right here you'll see that all resource operations have been disabled. We've already talked about the searchable property inside our resource classes, where you could pass in the columns the search of a specific resource should search through. But if we navigate to the browser, you'll see in the top left that Laravel Nova also supports a global search, where you could search through your entire application. But if we search for iPhone right here, you'll see that we have found our product resource with one item named iPhone 14. Now this is coming from, let's navigate back and open our product resource, scroll to the top, right here, where we have our public static title property defined. It used to be ID, so if we navigate back, refresh it and search for iPhone again, you'll see that we found one product where the ID is number 1. So let's navigate back and undo that. Now a pretty cool feature that Nova offers is the fact that you could add subtitles to your attribute global search, which is a pretty cool feature whenever you want to add additional information to the search results that we have right here. So let's do that. Let's navigate back and right below our public static title, let's define a function right here called public function subtitle. So the subtitle method is basically a static method inside the class that we're extending called resource. So we're basically going to overwrite the value. What we're going to do right here is basically return a subtitle of brand, colon, curly braces. We're going to grab the current resource, so this. We're going to get the brand with the name. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it and search for a product one more time without typos, you'll see that we have our title, which is iPhone 14, which is the product title. And then we have the brand, which is Apple. Now let's navigate back to PhpStorm and let's add a subtitle for our brand as well. So right at the top, let's say right here, public function subtitle, which we will return the industry where our brand is active on. So let's do that. Let's say this industry. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, search for, let's say, Apple, you'll see that they're active in the industry electronics. And it's even possible to add a ternary operator as a return statement. So let's do that for our users resource class. Let's open it and let's define our function first. So public function subtitle. And what we're going to do right here is return a ternary operator. So if the is_admin of a user that we're searching is equal to true, print out admin, else it's a user. If we navigate back, search for the user code with Dari, you'll see that code with Dari is an admin at the moment. Another pretty cool feature that Nova offers is limiting the number of results you can see inside the global search per resource. Now, at the moment, we can only search for one iPhone because we only have one product inside our application. If we had more, a complete list of iPhones will be shown, which means that we end up with the same results as the resource class. So there isn't really a difference whether you click on products in the sidebar or you search for an iPhone. Now Nova allows you to overwrite a new property which limits the number of products that will be visible. So let's navigate back to our product resource class, and right under our subtitle method, we're going to define a public static property named global search results. The value should be equal to an integer which will represent the number of rows that should be visible. At the moment, we only have 1. So let's say that we want to set the global search results equal to 1. Let's navigate back and let's create a new product of iPhone 14 Max. Test 1419. Product SKU, just random numbers, quantity of 25, the brand is Apple, and the status is checked. Alright, so we have 2 products right now, both starting with iPhone. And if we click on our global search, you'll see that you can only see one product right here, which is happening because we have set the global search results right here equal to 1. If we set it to 2, refresh it, search for iPhone, you'll see that we found 2 products right here. Now, you usually don't want to use a low number, so let's say 10 right here. Another pretty cool feature that Nova allows you to add on your global search is the debounce. And the debounce is the time before the results will be shown to you. Now, this needs to be changed as a global configuration, so we can't specify this for a specific resource, because this needs to be done for all resources. And whenever you want to change a configuration like that, you need to open the Nova service provider, where inside the boot method, we simply need to define the Nova class and chain the global search debounce method to it. And this method accepts one parameter, which will be an integer of the number of seconds it takes before the results will be visible. For demonstration purposes, let's just change it to 3. If we navigate back, refresh it, and search for iPhone again, you'll see that it has been delayed by 3 seconds, and that is happening because of our global search debounce right here. Now, I personally don't see any point of adding this on localhost, maybe on production in case your hosting isn't as good as others. So for now, let's just remove this line. The last 2 settings I'd like to show you regarding the global search is either disabling the global search of a resource or disabling the global search of all. Now let's start off by disabling a specific resource. And let's add it inside our user resource class. So let's open it and right below our subtitles. Now let's say that we want to override the public, static, globally searchable property, which has a default value of true, which means that we need to override the value to false if we want to turn it off. So let's do that. Let's set it equal to false. Let's navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it. Let's search for the user code with Dari. And as you can see, Nova replied with a message saying that the user has not been found. Now lastly, we could disable the entire search input field right here. And once again, whenever you want to disable a functionality that has been set globally, you need to perform some kind of functionality inside the Nova service provider. So let's do that. Let's open our Nova service provider. And right here, let's say that we want to call the Nova class again, colon, without global search. If we navigate to the browser and refresh it, and you will indeed see that our global search input field has completely been removed. Now by default, Nova adds a couple filters on your resource overview. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, you will find an icon in the top right corner which will represent the filters of our table. If we click on it, you'll see that we can filter based on trashed and untrashed and the amount of products you would like to see per page. There are different types of filters that we could use when it comes to filtering. And I won't be able to cover them all since not all types of filters are suitable for the example we've got. So I want to start off with the most common one, which is the select filter, which we could basically see right here, where it gives you an option to select from a drop-down. Now let's say that we want to add a filter right here where we could filter between the brands. And whenever you want to create a new filter, you need to navigate to the CLI because there is obviously a command for it, which is the PHP artisan Nova command, and we're going to create a filter where we do need to name it. So let's say that we want to create a filter where a user can select product from a brand. If we hit enter, you'll see that artisan prompted us with a message saying that a new filter has been generated inside the app directory, Nova subdirectory, where it's created a new subdirectory named filters with a product brand class. So let's navigate to PHP Storm to open the file. So right here we have filters and our product brands. So if we open it, it has one property defined right here called component, which will represent the filter type. In our case, we will indeed work with the default one, which is the select filter. Once you scroll down, you'll find 2 methods that have been added right here. The first one is the apply method right here, which handles the underlying eloquent query of your filter, while the second method is the option method right at the bottom, which defines the values the filter may have. Now filters won't be added to all resources, so we need to make sure that we register our filter for the resource class we would like to use it on with the table overview. Now we will be using our product brand filter on our product's overview, so what we could do is navigating to our product resource class and search for filters. Right here, you'll see that every resource class comes with a method where you could add filters on inside an array right here. So let's do that. So let's say that we want to return a new product brand class. Right now, we have registered our first filter. So let's test it out inside the browser. Inside Google Chrome, let's refresh it, click on our dropdown, and you'll see that we added our new filter named product brand with 0 options inside of it. So that's the next step. Let's make sure that we add the filter options right here. And once again, this needs to happen inside the filter class. So let's do that. Let's navigate to our product brand class. And we're going to start off with the apply method right here. And if we take a quick look at the arguments from the apply method right here, you'll see that we need to return some kind of eloquent query since it has a variable named query. So let's do that. We are returning a query right here. Now we're going to perform a where query since we want to select products where the brand is equal to a brand ID. So let's chain the where method right after our query right here, where we need to pass in two values. The first one is the column name, which will be brand underscore ID, while the second parameter will be the value right inside of the argument right here. Now next up is defining the options inside the dropdown. Keep in mind that we don't want to add all brands statically right here at the bottom, but we rather want to perform a database request to get all brands, loop over them, and return it back as options. So let's do that. Let's remove our return statement. Let's define a new variable called new options, which is equal to an array. Then we're going to add a for each loop because we're going to loop over our brand model, where we're going to get all values as one single brand. Then inside our loop, we're simply going to set our array that we have right here. So new options, brackets, equal to the brand ID. Now keep in mind that we need to define a key as well, otherwise it will be 0, 1, and 2 of brand name. Finally, we need to make sure that we return our new options array. Now if we navigate to the browser, refresh it, open our filter, click on the dropdown, you'll see that we added Apple, Microsoft, and Adidas right here. So let's add Adidas first, where you see that no products have been found because we don't have any products inside our database where the product brand is equal to Adidas. And if we change it to Apple, you'll see that both products have been found. When it comes to admin panels, you do always want to show some kind of statistics related to your project to the user. Users gain insight of business indicators of your application. Let's say that you would like to see how many products the user has added per day or week into your application. Now Nova allows you to define different types of metrics. We've got value, trends, partitions, and progress. The most common one is the value metrics, which displays a single value that could also be changed to a previous time interval. So let's say that we want to add a new metric right on our resource overview right here, where we could see how many products have been added every day, week, and month. Now metrics needs to be created through the CLI, where we need to perform the PHP artisan Nova command, colon, and we're not going to add metric right here since there are different types of metrics. So what we could do right here is add a value. Then we need to name it, so let's name it new products. If we hit enter, you'll see that metrics will be stored inside the app directory, Nova, a new subdirectory called metrics, where a class called new products has been created successfully. If we navigate to PHP Storm and open it, right here, you'll see our new class called new products, where you will find some key features right here. The first one is the calculate method right here, which returns a magic value result instance. Now metrics will basically calculate something for you, right? By default, the count helper has been added right here, which will perform a count query on a specific model. You have the option to replace the count helper right here with the average method. You could replace it with the sum method, the max method, and the min method. All these should make sense. So I won't cover them. So let's go back to count. By default, you'll see that Nova adds the model class right here, which basically tells us that we need to replace it with the model we want to calculate our products on. Well, in our case, it will be the product model. So not the Nova resource class, but the actual model. Then we have the range method right at the bottom, which defines the ranges available for metrics. As you could see right here, it has a couple default ones. We have 30 days, 60 days, 365 days, so basically a year. You can have the statistics of today, the month to date, the quarter to date, and the year to date. Nova allows you to add a couple more right here. So let's just add them for demonstration purposes, right under today. Let's say that we want to define a new value named yesterday. And the value is double underscore with a key of yesterday. Right under year to date, we're going to add all, which will basically show all time. So basically all the products that have been created. Now keep in mind that you can change up the values right here, because Nova uses built-in functionalities for today, yesterday, months, quarters, and years. Now the last method inside our new products class is the cache for method. And since we're going to add a metric, you don't want to update the data every time a user refreshes the browser, but you rather want to use some kind of cache, which will cache it after a couple minutes. Now that can be done right here. I won't be doing anything with it because I don't want to wait 5 minutes whenever I make changes. Now just like using filters, we need to make sure that we register our metric, which needs to be done right inside of the product resource class. If we scroll up, you'll find a cards method inside of every resource class, which is returning an array. So let's pull in our new products metrics. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that we added a new metric right above our products overview, which is showing us that we got 2 products defined in the last 30 days. If we change it up to, let's say, today, you'll see that we have no data because no product has been added today, even though the video is recorded right after it. Now let's make it a little bit more complex, where we are going to create new metrics which will show the average product price. Let's navigate back to the CLI, and let's define a new metric by saying PHP artisan Nova value, and let's name it average price. Alright, let's open it, and let's start off with the count method. Right here, we're going to replace the model with our product model. We're going to replace the count method with the average method because we're going to calculate the average price. And right now it's throwing an error message because one required parameter is missing, which is the column, which we need to add right after the model. So we're basically going to say, well, calculate the average on the price column inside our products table. Now keep in mind that there are some additional methods that you could chain right here on your average method. So let me show them to you. The first one is the currency method, where you could basically pass in a currency. So I'm working with the currency of euro, so let's add it right here as a symbol. But if you use dollars, you could basically add that as well. But for now, I'm going to use euros. And then you could also add a suffix method right to it, which basically adds a string behind the amount. So let's say per unit. Now let's navigate to a product resource class because we obviously need to register it. So let's say new average price. If we navigate to the browser right now, refresh it, you'll see a new metric right here where the average price for the last 30 days of our products is 1.22k. Now let's dive into the third metric type, which is the trends metric type. And a trend will basically display values through a line chart. So let's say that we want to see how many products a user has created over time. So let's navigate back to iTerm. And let's say PHP artisan Nova. We're going to create a trend called products per day. Now trends will also be stored inside the metrics directory where you'll find our products per day class. Except there are way more methods you could perform on a calculate method right here. So let me show that to you. Let's navigate back to Google Chrome and let's open the Nova documentation. And let's go inside the sidebar to metrics, so defining metrics, and let's search for trends. Right here, somewhere at the bottom, you'll see that you're basically able to count by months, weeks, days, hours, and minutes, but the same can be performed for the average, sum, max, and minimum. So what we're going to do is basically calculate it by days as it is, and we're going to calculate it on the product model. You could also change the ranges right here. Right now it is calculated in 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days, which is fine as well. So let's make sure that we register our metric. New products per day. Navigate back to Google Chrome. Open our local host. Refresh it. And right here, you'll see that we have an average products per day of 0, but you'll see that on the 31st, right here, we have created 2 new products. If we look at 60 days, you'll see that we have more zeros again. Now keep in mind that the methods we defined for our value metrics are also chainable on the trend metrics, so I won't cover them right now. Now there are 2 other metric types, which are partition metrics and progress metrics, which I won't cover because in the next video, I'm going to work on a dashboard where I'm also going to add metrics. If you already want to look into them, I recommend you to look into the official documentation of Nova, which I will link in the description down below. From the start of our Laravel Nova admin panel, you might have noticed that Nova provided us with a dashboard page, where you basically will be redirected to once you log in. If we click on main in the left sidebar, you will see a default resource page where you could see what you could add on your dashboard. In this video, we will be focusing on adding a couple metrics and cards. If we navigate to PHP Storm, you will find a dashboard subdirectory right inside of the Nova directory. In here, you will find the main dashboard, which I've just shown you on the front end, right here. It is a pretty straightforward class, which is extending the dashboard class. Right inside of the cards method, you could simply add your metrics. Let's start off by making a new metric where we could see how many admins and non-admins our application has. To do that, we should start off by defining a new metric, which is a partition. And a partition could basically be seen as a pie chart of values. So let's navigate back to the CLI and let's perform the PHP artisan nova partition command followed with the name of your partition. In our case, it will be users per role. If we hit enter, you'll see that our partition has been created successfully, and partitions will be stored inside the metrics subdirectory, right here, where we simply need to make a small change inside the calculate method. We're basically going to perform the count helper, but not on the model class, but on the user model class. We need to replace the third argument as well, which is the group by. So we're basically going to group by a column inside our database of is_admin. Now, like I've just mentioned, registering metrics inside your dashboard basically works in the same way as you have done with metrics. So let's open our main dashboard class and let's remove our new helper, where we're going to add our new users per role. And we navigate to our dashboard and refresh it, you will see that we only have one user where the role is an admin. So what we could do is basically creating a new user from the user's resource where the checkbox of our admin column has not been checked. Now, before we could do that, we should actually disable our authorizable method on our user resource. Let's do that real quick, right at the bottom. And if we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you will see that we can create our user again. Let's just name it test, an email of test@hotmail.com. Let's add a random password. Let's not check the role. Let's create our user. If we go to our users overview, you will see that we have 2 users. So let's go back to our dashboard and right here, you'll see that we have 2 different roles with 2 total users. One user where the role has been checked and one user where the role has not been checked. Now let's add another metric where we could see how many users has registered in the last month. So let's navigate back to iTerm. Let's define a new PHP artisan Nova value named registered users. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's open our new registered users metric. Right here, we're simply going to replace our model with the user model, register our new created metric inside our dashboard. So new registered user, navigate back to Google Chrome. And right here, you'll see that we have added our newly created metric on our dashboard. Now Nova also allows you to override the dashboard name. At the moment, we're working inside a main class, which is alright because we're only going to work with one dashboard. But Nova allows you to override the default name, even though your class name is still main. Now to do that, we could simply override the name method inside our dashboard class. So let's do that. Let's say public function name, where we simply need to return a string of the name where we want to change it to. So let's say dashboard. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that inside our navbar, main has been changed to dashboard, and the title of our dashboard has also been changed to dashboard. Now, as you could see, Nova ships with a default sidebar right here, where we could choose between our dashboard and our resources. You might have noticed that it also adds the resource right inside of the sidebar as well, where it will bring you to your resource overview. Now, a pretty cool feature that Nova offers is that you could completely customize the menu based on your own preferences. Now, changes like these need to be made inside the Nova service provider. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's search for our Nova service provider, where we could use the main menu on our Nova class. But before we do that inside the boot method, I prefer to define a separate method where we define our custom Nova menu, which will then be called inside the boot method. So let's scroll to the bottom, and right under our get footer content method, we're going to define a new one called private function get custom menu, where we need to make a call to the Nova class. And let me actually scroll down, colon, which gives us access to the main menu method. Now, the main menu method accepts a callback function. So let's add it. Let's say function, and it accepts a parameter, which is the request object. And I think I forgot to pull it in. All right, it is the Illuminate HTTP class right here. Now, inside our main menu, we're simply going to return back one array. Now, the real magic needs to happen inside this array, where we're basically going to define how our menu should look. In most cases, you will be starting off with a menu section. So let's add it right here, which is the parent button you will see on our resource menu right now. If we take a look at our menu, we got our dashboard right here, which is our menu section. So let's redefine our dashboard menu class. This can be done by making a call to the dashboard method, where we need to pass in the dashboard class, which will be main, class. Now let's actually test it out. This can be done by scrolling up back to our boot method, where we need to make a call to our get custom menu. If we then navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll do indeed see that we have our dashboard button, but the others have disappeared. Now, it also allows you to overwrite the default icon that has been added right here. Nova uses the hero icon set that has been created by Steve Skroger, which I will link in the description down below. Now, with the usage of icons, it basically allows you to, let me show that to you, chain a new method to it named icon, where you could simply pass in the icon class name as a string. So for our dashboard, let's say that we want to add the chart-bar icon. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, and right here you will see that our dashboard is visible with a new added icon. Now, this was simple. So let's create a new section right below of it with items inside of it. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's define a new menu section right below the current one, where we're going to call the make method instead of the dashboard method. Now, the first parameter will be a string of the name. So let's say products, while the second one will be an array because we're going to add multiple items right here. So every menu section could have menu items. So let's call the make method again. Then we need to add pretty much the same pattern. So we need to add the name of our menu item, which will be all products, while we need to add a second one as well, which will be the path to /resources/products. Now let's duplicate the line that we have right here, because we're also going to add a menu item for create a single product, where the path will be /resources/products/new. Now let's also add an icon to our menu section with the name of shopping-bag. So a drop-down menu will be created for us right now. But there is an option where you could chain the collapsible method to it, meaning that our menu will be open by default. So let's test it out inside Google Chrome. Let's refresh it, and right here you'll see our products, which is collapsible, but it's open by default, where we can choose between all products and create a single product. Now, this also means that whenever you make a menu section with menu items inside of it, the menu section will not redirect you to another page, which is understandable because you can't select a menu which can be opened and closed, and also be redirected to another page. Now let's create a new menu section. But we're not going to call the make method or dashboard method right here, but we're going to simply call the resource method, which accepts a resource rather than a string, what we have done before. So let's say that we want to create a new menu section for our brand class, and we want to add an icon of tag. Now let's navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, and right here, you'll see that we created a new menu section where we could simply navigate to our brands. Now another great feature that Nova supports is authorizing specific menu items. With that, you could easily disable certain menu items when a user is not an admin. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and let's actually duplicate our menu section of products. Right below our brand menu section, the name will be users. The first menu item will be all users to /resources/users. Then we can create a new user as well to a /resource/users/new. So what we could do right now is basically go right after our menu item, which we only want to show to users that are admins, and chain the can see method to it. And let me actually outline it on the line below. Right here, we could pass in a callback function. So let's do that. Of the Nova request. Inside our can see method, we could simply return the request user, and it's only visible whenever a user is an admin. Then we need to change the icon to, let's say, users. And if we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see a new section right here of our users, where we could select all users or create a new user. But if we navigate to our users overview and select our code with Dari user, which we are using right now, edit it. Now let's say that we want to uncheck our role. If we update the user, you'll see that the create users in the left panel has been removed because the user that is currently logged in, so code with Dari, is not an admin. So right now I will cut out the part where I change the user role to admin again inside the database. Nova also allows you to add menu items which are coming from an external link. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and right under our users menu section, let's define a new menu item with an external, where we're going to make a call to an external link method. The first parameter will be the name, so let's say visit site, while the second parameter will be the path of https://nova.laravel.com/docs. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that we added a new menu item right here called visit site. If we click on it, you'll see that we have been redirected to Nova's official documentation, but it hasn't opened another page. So what we could do is navigate back and chain the open in new tab method right to it, which basically speaks for itself. If we go back, refresh the page, click on visit site again, you'll see that we have opened a new tab of our Nova documentation. Now it also has a pretty cool feature which allows you to add menu item badges, which is pretty much a visual badge that you can add right next to your menu item. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and let's say that we want to add a badge right next to our menu section of dashboard, which is the first one right here. This can be done by chaining the with badge method to it, where we simply need to add a name of new, while the second one will be the type of alert, which are the default types of warning, danger, and so on. And right now we're going to pass in a success right here. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you will see a beautiful new badge right here called new, which is placed next to our dashboard, which is green and is basically telling us that our dashboard menu item is new. By default, Laravel Nova ships with a notification bell which is visible on the front end of your application, right next to your name in the top right corner. Nova lets you completely free to implement whatever you want to notify a user with, right through the Nova notification class. Now let's say that for this example, we would like to notify all users that are registered into our database that a new user has been created inside our application. This could either be done right inside of the policy class, but I personally prefer to use an observer for these type of functionalities, since an observer will basically group all of your listeners into a single class. Observers come with method names which reflect the eloquent events you wish to listen for. So it generates a class with all CRUD operations, where we could add a Nova notification on once a user has been created, updated, or deleted. Observers needs to be created through the CLI. So let's navigate to iterm, and let's run the php artisan make::observer command, and let's name it user observer. And we're also going to add our model to it by saying _model is equal to user. Keep in mind that we don't need to run a Nova command since the observer isn't a feature of Nova, but of Laravel itself. If we hit enter, you'll see that our user observer has been created successfully, which has been stored inside a observer subdirectory inside the app directory. But before we open it, let's actually make sure that we register our observer first before it could work, which needs to be done right inside of the app service provider, where we could either register our observer inside a boot method, or we could define a new private method right below of it whenever you want to work with multiple observers of private function observers. Right here, we will basically make a call to our user model, which gives us access to the observe method. Inside the observe method, we simply need to pass in the observer we would like to use for our user model. In our case, this will be the user observer class. Now before we could finally use it, let's make a call to our observer method right here by saying this observers. And now it's time to focus on our user observer inside our observer subdirectory right here. You will find a couple methods that have been predefined for us in a time when the request has been performed. So once a user has been created right here, the created method will be called to perform whatever has been defined inside of it. And the same goes for updated, deleted, restored, and force deleted. The core functionality will be pretty much the same for all methods. So let's start off with the create method at the top. Once a user has been created, we got to make sure that we loop over all users inside our database, inside a for each loop. Now we're going to loop over our user model, all, as one single U. Now through every user we are looping over to, we have access to the notify method. Well, let me actually rephrase that. The notify method is only available on your user object whenever you add the, give me one moment, right here, notifiable trait on your user model class. By default, Laravel adds it on your user model. Now if we navigate back to our user observer, we could simply say that we want to notify a user through the Nova notification. And we're going to chain the make method to it. Then we could chain a couple methods right here to define our notification. So let's start off by saying the message is equal to new user. Now let's concatenate, let's say our user object, which is right here. And we're going to grab the name. Then we have the option to chain the icon method to add an icon. So let's say user. And finally, we're going to add the type. So basically the color, which in our case will be success. Now let's test it out. Let's navigate back to Google Chrome. Let's create a new user. Let's name it John Doe. Email of johndoe@hotmail.com. Password is something secret. And the role is checked. If we click on create user, our user has been created. And as you can see in the top right corner, we have a new notification. If we click on it, you will see that our application has one new user named John Doe, which has been created 18 seconds ago. Now let's mark it as read and the red sidebar is gone. Now since we are going to perform the same functionality for pretty much every method that we have defined right here, it won't be smart to copy paste our for each loop in every single method. I think it's the best to make a separate method for it that accepts a couple arguments of the content we would like to see different. So let's name it get Nova notification. It is a private method. We need the PHP doc blocks. Let's refactor it. Alright, let's scroll down right here. Now let's add a couple arguments of the content we would like to see different right here. We don't want the entire user object, but we simply want to pass it in whenever we make a call to our getNova notification method. We need a new message and we need a type. Then inside our for each loop, we're going to change our message. So let's completely delete it. Let's say that we want to print out the message here, and let's concatenate a space. Now let's pass in the user name. Then we have our icon, which in the case of our user observer will always be a user. And then we have the type, which will not be success, but it will be the type from the parameter. Now inside our create method, you'll probably see an error right now because we're missing 2 parameters. Now the second one, which will be a string of new user. Then we have our type, so our alert type, which will be success. Now let's make one more user. Let's navigate to Google Chrome, create a new one. Let's name this one New John Doe. The email is newjohndoe@hotmail.com. We have a password. Now let's say that it's an admin. Create it. Wait a moment before a notification bell pops up. Right here, you'll see that we have a new user named New John Doe. At the moment, we're still not sure if it works for all users. At the moment, we're logged in as Code with Dari. So let's log out. Now let's log in as John Doe. Add a password. Click on login. And you do indeed see that we have a notification bell. And right here, it says that a new user named New John Doe and John Doe have both been created. Now with the one line of code that we have inside our created method, we could simply copy paste it and change our arguments from our getNova notification method. Now the second one is the updated, where we want to pass in a message of updated user with a type of info. We have a deleted method, so whenever a user gets deleted, we want to say deleted a user named, where the type will be error. Now we could also restore users, so restore where the type is success. Finally, we have our force delete method, where we're going to add a message of force deleted user with a type of error. Now let's navigate back to Google Chrome and let's test out a couple. Let's say that we want to edit New John Doe and we want to add spaces. If we update it, open our notification. Right here, you'll see that we have updated the New John Doe and the icon is blue. Let's say that we want to delete New John Doe. Open our notification, wait a moment. You'll see a new notification where New John Doe has been deleted.